Okay. I gotta change my name. Keep forgetting that. Restream. Let me change the name. All right, so we got a pretty fun schedule coming up here. Today we get to start working on part 2. I don't think we're going to make like a significant amount of progress, but I think it's going to be nice to actually start thinking about this. And certainly that'll get my brain rolling. I think that's kind of one of the main takeaways for part 1 is that if we just start thinking about it, then we're going to predispose ourselves to come up with ideas, etc., going forward. So it's worth doing this earlier than later. And this is going to be the part 2 is going to be the part that people really, really like. I mean, science and philosophy can only get you so far, but when we start bringing out practical tools and tips on how you can achieve any goal you ever want, then now we're talking everyone's language. All right, update titles. Part 2. What would be a good name for this type of thing? No puns. Just have it on to the next. I always kind of like to have it. As long as we're not big and like it doesn't really matter what our title means, because at some point I think we will want to switch to having a title that means what we're actually doing, and perhaps we should get in the habit of doing that. I still don't know what kind of format I would want to go with, but yeah, we do want to actually. You know what? Let's try that out for today. I think we should get in that habit. Maybe it's like fundamental, practical strategies. Let's just do that. Fundamental practical strategy. Boom. All right. Did I? You know what? I think I kind of like totally disregarded my roadmap. This is what, August 3rd. So we didn't start Maps Meeting Mondays, but no worries. We could start that next week. Start streaming on YouTube. We did do that. So that's cool. We are not posting VODs to YouTube because it auto posts, I think. That's actually a good question. Did we get a post from yesterday? Oh, we got a comment. Oh, it's Dom. Dharma Dom himself. All right, let's go to YouTube Studio first. Let's what is it? The community page? Comments? Oh yeah. And then do we have any? We need a money bag emoji. Copy paste. Yeah, let's gank this guy. Oh. Copied. Boom. With the plus. All right, then content. Do we have videos for... So we have live. It shows yesterday's live replay. Public. Okay. So does that go under like playlists or anything? Promotions. How do we actually see the channel? How do we go from this to the channel? Is it just always up here? Just like in Twitch? And now if I go to live, yeah, you get that. Okay, so, and it shows that I'm live. Nice. Hi everyone. Welcome, and that's our welcome. Okay. What else do we need to do? We need to go to Twitch, and we got to gank our stream from yesterday. Oh, we got a notification. Kai Sanat. All right, we are pretty far away from Kai in terms of clout on Twitch, so not yet. Channel. What am I looking for? Channel. Yeah, I'm trying to find my stream from yesterday. And here we go. Buckle down. Let's get it. All right, I'm going to have that running. That's going to be transcribing so that we can create a nice summary. And this is going to go here. Roadmap part 2. All right, so we gotta have 2 pages open for this. We gotta get into the nitty gritty. Really, we want to have the outline here where we could kind of place things, and then we need to drag and drop other content as we scroll down. So really, what we should do first. Potential order to build upon as we read through these notes. We need to now start making headers out of all these things. So let's see what kind of headers we could go with. I think maybe header 2 for now. So what do we got? Reflection. So we're trying to go in the direction, actually not in the direction, but we're going in the same type of how do I say this? At the end of part 1, we kind of arrive at this framework of freedom. It's like the first part of this. Like there's 3 pillars of this framework. The first one is kind of retrospective. It's kind of pointing out how what we believe that we can do and what we think and all that stuff is predisposed by our past. You know, it's there's. It's a recognition that we are always dealing with constraints that are affected by nature and nurture, by what you learn, by what you thought 10 minutes ago, by how you feel right now, like you're a mood. So that's the first part. The second part is freedom through reflection. So this is kind of the present, like what you can do right now. To affect the future. And then at the very end here, realignment. This is like what you can do going forward. So like it's kind of like the periodic reflecting on how you're doing, pretty much, which is why it's at the very end here. This is like a pretty niche end game thing. Really, what we want to figure out throughout part 2 is what can we reflect upon now? What can we intend to do now? What deliberate intentions can we make now and work towards that could affect us in the future, such that, you know, if you were to think in that future moment, you reflect upon retrospectively what has led you to that position of being able to do something, or you could point out that I did this thing. One of the takeaways we have from part 1 is that what we're really looking for, in order for me to do something, is we're ultimately trying to get to the point where I feel like I have done that thing. So we could always think about it in terms of the subjective quality of what must I do in order to feel as though I have done that thing. Like it's almost as if you have to convince yourself that you have done this thing. So, you know, certainly, I mean, this kind of sounds weird, but certainly, you know, if you wanted to be a millionaire, like what can you do to convince yourself that you're a millionaire? And it would be pretty difficult to get there to that feeling without actually seeing the $1 million, right? So it's not sidestepping the actual doing the thing. It's just pointing out that the gauge that actually determines for you that you've done that thing is that experience that the thing is done, and not so much that, you know, some external the thing being done. It's the experience that you have where you realize that you have done that thing, or that thing has been done. That might seem pretty mundane, but it's actually quite powerful in affecting how we think about the pursuit towards that aim. Especially for much more ambiguous goals. So that's the benefit we get out of looking at it that way. So I guess I said all this just to point out that the way that we're going to structure part 2 is hopefully going to be through that lens of the framework of freedom that we came up with. And so this is kind of a speculative outlining of how I think we could go about this, where we could talk about reflection. So what is this? Dopamine and mindfulness. Really, we should talk about all the key relevant neuromodulators in terms of focus. So this is like anything that affects focus, motivation. So could we talk about that? Focus, motivation, etc. So what is this? Anything that affects your, I don't know if this is the right way of going about this, that closely affects your reflection in the moment. Is that the framing here? So then we have identifying goals through reflection. So now like leveraging reflection. So the first part perhaps is describing what actually affects your reflection. And then we could talk about what you can start doing with that reflection. First here for identifying goals. So that's why we get to creativity as a central topic here. I'm not sure what else we really can look into in terms of trying to identify goals other than creativity, considering our underlying concerns, considering which are worth pursuing versus not, or worth getting rid of, something like that. We don't know why yet, right? There's no like ultimate goal in part 2. Other than abstractly to identify and achieve your goals, as you know, as weird as that loop is, but there's no like concrete goal that we're like working towards other than that. So yeah, we can think that perhaps there are underlying concerns, underlying processes, etc. Processes, interests, etc. Consider where, and then this should be like a whole separate thing. So this is it's almost like taking stock. I think this is always going to be a central theme. Creativity as an so this is now affecting our ability to do these types of things. We should say aims, etc. Creativity helping us in the process of ideation, etc. This is identifying goals through reflection. Okay. And then now we have to pursue the goals that we've identified through reflection. Pursuing goals through reflection. And what would that be like? Also looking into things like learning, building habits. So this is where we start getting into the stuff. Like this is the real big stuff that we start getting into. Learning, building habits. So anything that contributes towards our orientation towards a goal. And then we need to question, is this tracking goals through reflection? It seems to be just as important. I'm not sure if this is the right order, but this is really important. Where, like, I think this might even come before the pursuing the goals through reflection. This is like really making it explicit. So making it explicit I should say making explicit where we are, where we want to be, etc. Being precise in speech, logical reasoning, fallacies, etc. All these things allow us to navigate the path that leads us from where we are now to where we want to be. And I do believe that these would actually come before the pursuing the goals through reflection. So this is not just tracking, this is like making explicit making goals explicit. Pursuing, yeah, this is going to now be pursuing. So really learning is going to be a huge deal here. Learning, building habits. Building habits is not as important as learning in this sense. But this is kind of what we're dealing with. I could do something like this. Actually, yeah, I want to do that. All right. Identifying concerns through reflection. So this is where I had the identifying the concerns. Huh. Because I think this is where, yeah, this is where we could think about bias and stuff that is getting in your way. So perhaps we do just get into one part of that discussion here, and then we get into the other part here. However, the topic of building habits seems to go hand in hand with the topic of breaking habits. So how do we go about that? Do we want to keep those close, or do we want to have it so that we kind of introduce this guy earlier and then we get into the breaking habits through this pursuing goals? Like your goal could be breaking that habit for the sake of a goal, etc. So I'm not sure the most effective way to go about that. But we shall see. All right. Oh, wait 1 second. All right, so then do I want to change this right now, or do I want to maybe think about this? All right, let's first separate this guy from the other one. So this is considering our... Yeah, you know what? This topic has to stay together. You can't disconnect these things. Because if we're going to do a survey of what we're actually interested in, you know, and what's guiding us implicitly or inherently, then we're going to find things that we perhaps don't want to do, or that we deliberately want to get rid of, for the goal, or for the point pursuit, within the pursuit, for the pursuit, for the purpose of actually getting to another aim. So, yeah, once we get to here, we could talk about breaking habits. So instead of identifying concerns through reflection, consider how they conflict or help us with our pursuit towards deliberate intentions. Yeah, so this has to go earlier. But what about biases? Where would biases come in here? We could just, I think the idea would be perhaps only introduce this topic here, but don't actually go into a discussion about preemptive intentions, I guess. Deterrence. I definitely spelled that wrong. So pursuing goals. So the next thing would be something like pursuing yeah, is it all just under pursuing goals? So this would be like breaking habits. This would be like becoming familiar with biases. Yeah, like this is a separate topic, so it's going to be like pursuing a resolution. I don't know, pursuing a fix for obstacles. That's like a terrible way of saying it, but this would be something to point out. Figuring out what to do about certain concerns. Yeah, okay. Oh, so this, yeah, this is a different discussion that I brought up. This is also a discussion about disposition. Huh, so I feel like this is another entire conversation. So this would be something like reflecting on it's like pursuing goals. So I'm wondering if we need to bring this discussion sooner as yeah, this has to be within the conversation about identifying our concerns. But it's not a discussion about what you can do. So now this is going to be something like considering the effects that certain aspects of our disposition have on us as we pursue our goals. That's the type of thing. So this is all under pursuing goals, kind of. Okay, then what's this next one? Reflecting on what we can do now to mitigate concerns about our concerns. Right. That's a similar thing. That's kind of what we're looking at here. So this is kind of a preemptive. This is almost like pursuing meta goals almost, but that's not the best way of saying it. Considering pursuing forward thinking long term it's almost like this, pursuing changes to predisposition. So this is affecting long-term growth almost. No, we can't have a discussion about growth. That can't be the topic here. It's long-term goal pursuit. So these are kind of like meta goals almost. It's basically pursuing goals that help us pursue our goals almost. But that's kind of all of these things, right? Same with learning. Same with building habits. So I don't think that's the right type of way to talk about this. So there's almost like a positive. We can't say positive and negative because a lot of times we really don't want to make it seem like disposition is a negative. It's just something that you have to consider. Like if you are very conscientious versus not that conscientious, that does have an effect on how you might pursue your goals. And there's things you could do to do in light of that information. And then yeah, realignment. Okay, so let's kind of go through with this. Maybe we do create a header 3 for something. This would be directly pursuing goals, and this is something like mitigating, not mitigating, but dealing with predisposition itself almost, right? Concerns, that breaking habits. But yeah, this is also dealing with predisposition. Everything's dealing with predisposition. That's why you can't go with that. It's just obstacles, constraints. What's the way to go about this? Breaking habits, becoming familiar with biases, dealing with concerns. I'm not sure. It's like inherent constraints. Directly pursuing deliberate goals, dealing with inherent constraints. I think that's the best we could do right now. And then this part is going to be something like the process of pursuit. Process of realignment. Which is like, yeah, figuring out like how to push ourselves, almost like how to push ourselves if we want to achieve the goals. How to, the first one is how to reassess our trajectory towards our goals. One of these has to be how to like handle our own self judgment. This has to be part of this, because regardless of what the goal is, we could start bringing out, you know, these underlying topics. Yeah. All right, let's start going down. We got being precise in speech. This is where we have a fuller conversation about the implications of our discussions on truth, norms, social equilibria, etc., specifically in a practical sense. It allows us to resolve questions like what is the meaning of life in a highly pragmatic way. We wouldn't do this actually here. This should be actually answered in part 3. Once again, we can think about the world in multiple ways. We can see how the constraints of our conceptual understanding limit the possible allowed ways we can think about the world, yet there are many possibles still within that range. For example, we can answer the question, who are you, from multiple valid perspectives, biological, experiential, etc. There doesn't have to be a single correct absolute answer. Yet, crucially so, there are answers that we can consider to be wrong according to our fuller conceptual understanding. Being precise about these relevant relations allows us to justify different possible and impossible perspectives. Once again, consequence and incompatibility. Once again, through the lens of consequence and incompatibility. So then, when given a question/prompt that we find ambiguous in the sense that we can consider many different perspectives with which to answer the question, then we can make the question/prompt more precise, limiting the possible valid answers to the question, ultimately leaving us with one clear perspective, not actually a single discrete way to answer the question, as you could change up the words/phrasing you use, but effectively a single way, in the sense that you believe that the perspective is sufficiently unambiguous about what the perspective implies and what people could possibly infer. Yikes, that's a crazy thing to say. But let's put that in there. Let's try to just start shoving things in, and chances are we're going to have to go into deeper headers here. Like, I think we should actually make this a heading 3 just so that we can really organize this content, and then maybe we do logical reasoning here as another header 3. We could just do it as we kind of add things in. So one of the first meta strategies in order to internalize this understanding and maintain it such that it affords us new possibilities on what we can do, we must self-consciously reflect on it periodically. This is a discussion about the meta processes of. This is a discussion about that deserves perhaps the spot of the epilogue. That's actually kind of crazy if we talk about meta strategies in the epilogue. Meta strategies. As needing to change when we find that we are, once we habitualize this strategy, we physically integrate it and unconsciously apply it to our future understandings, then we unconsciously regulate ourselves as needing to change when we find that we are in error. Book. Oh, I see. Potentially to be replaced elsewhere, to be more authentic. Okay, so this is old notes. That's why this is so out of the blue. Potentially to be placed somewhere else. To be more authentic in a Heideggerian sense over time is not something one can do in a single moment. Rather, it is a physically long-term, forward-looking strategy, intentional reflecting on something now in order for our. Okay, so this is something that we actually cover within part 1, just more more accessibly. All right, this has an additional outcome of being in tune with how the strategy might change in its nuances, what it might mean to focus on the strategy, which aspects of the strategy to focus on. Okay, let's move that there now and see what we think about later. Oh my gosh, now that we have these meta strategies in place, we are ready to look at a significant weakness in its regulation mechanisms. By applying these strategies, we have essentially shaped physically over time that which is disclosed through being to align with our intentions. However, a key constituent of this process is our understanding of whether or not we understand ourselves as doing the thing, which is a product of our physical contingencies. In another sense, we need to consider whether our conscience is calibrated. Otherwise, we can linger in the space of doing the thing without ever making substantial progress towards the state of having done the thing. This new strategy states, as part of doing the thing, one must pursue a better understanding of what doing the thing means. And one can pursue a better understanding of how to do the thing in order to... Okay, so this is actually a topic that we would want to bring up earlier. It's almost like a philosophical argument that, along with like learning, almost this is like a meta strategy that it's worth considering what it would mean for you to do the thing at every step of the way. Obviously, this is pretty implicit when you know you're trying to do something. You have to figure out how to, you know, what it is that you have to do. So this is the type of argument that we probably should make earlier, as we are allowed to make this because of part 1. But how early can we make this type of argument? It would be making goals explicit through reflection. No, I think it would be pursuing goals through reflection. Ooh. Is this just part of the topic of learning? All right, we might have to make this a header 1. This might have to be a header 2 then. Learning might have to be the header 3. And then this is like meta strategies about learning, but we have to put it here. What doing the thing means, and one can pursue a better understanding of how to do the thing. In other words, how to be, in order to have a better understanding of how to be doing the thing. More closely to the perspectives I've been using, understanding oneself as doing the thing must involve understanding oneself as learning better how to be doing the thing, with the goal of reaching an understanding of having learned better how to be doing the thing. Yikes. All right, is this all part of this? This could be the how to push ourselves almost. This is kind of in that same type of discussion. These are the meta strategies. It's a different topic, though. Like, I think we have to talk about the ethical side of goals earlier in this discussion. I think that should be a theme throughout this whole way. That, like, the idea is that if you want to do this goal, then there are things that you have to do. Like, these are rules. They're conceptual rules about the goal itself. Yeah, if you want to be a millionaire, you have to have $1 million. Like, that's a rule. It's an ethic of that goal itself. So, and so the meta strategy that I say in a very convoluted way here is that if you want to achieve any goal, you ought to learn those ethics of what is required to actually achieve the goal. And obviously that's just like a discussion of just learning things. But yeah, we're gonna have to separate this stuff out, because this learning here is talking about how, like, literal learning strategies, like, in other words, how to learn better. It's not about how learning affects your understanding of what you're doing, which could be I think this is like a making goals explicit. And it's not necessarily through reflection, but it can be through reflection. Being precise in speech, logical reasoning. Would it be just here? Meta strategies. And ethics. Goal ethics maybe should be. I don't know if that's going to be what we call it, but we can derive the meta strategies from the idea of the goal ethics, which is why I put it there. Now this could just be pursuing goals. All right, so now we have the following strategy. Okay, so this is where I really built out those meta strategies. So now we have the following strategies. Paying attention and mindfulness will keep you on track. However, misaligned the track is. Learning about the track will amount in a track more aligned with your ultimate destination. Intentional mindfulness, reflection of reflection, will habitualize with number 1. And 4, improving learning abilities in general will amount in a more efficacious number 2. Interesting. Okay. This is an interesting way of going about this. I might want to have this as like something I look to like in the top here almost. Just to keep in mind. This is going to be where I think some of the magic of part 2 comes from, but we have to be really careful about bringing this up. All right, we need to look into different techniques that people use to maintain order over time. Specifically, we need to look at how our order-keeping strategy of habitualization conflicts with our chaos welcoming being open strategy. For example, when determining whether I am currently in the space of doing the thing, I may look at the reasons justifying this certainty, and I grab one reason and hold on to it without fully knowing fully the relational significance that it has with other reasons, or knowing the weight of significance it has towards the full in itself. I'm still talking in like a Hegel way or a Brandom way. It has towards the full in itself of the recollection inherently. Then instead of determining whether my action aligns with doing the thing, I can instead determine whether my action aligns with the held reason. We should actually... This is a topic to be talking about similarly with the being precise in speech and logical reasoning, actually. We have to hit logical reasoning at a slightly different angle than people normally do. We need to touch upon this at a slightly different, I should say, in a slightly different way than people normally do. And then inspiration, despite being convoluted. So yeah, this is to maintain order over time is kind of what we're getting at, where we're trying to maintain awareness of our explicit goals here. And then what did I copied that. I need to procedurify this. Okay, it's difficult to just express these concepts as static constituents of recollection. Rather, these are procedures that amount to the same explicit and implicit contents to get into the metaphysical granularity of this. Each, when talking about procedures, this would be intentionally reflecting upon the habitualized truth of the matter and intentionally reflecting upon the prompt of what doing the thing means. Involves comparing the potentiality of two concepts such as... Oh, man, I remember having this thought. It was so long ago, I just don't remember what it's about, but I think it's worth keeping. But I'm going to have to really think about this at some point. But this is all in the discussion of whether or not we can, like, navigating the logic of our own reasons. In light of the fact that reasons make us feel certain and not the other way around in some sense. In order to restore groundedness, one can either, and in either case this amounts to intentional reflection, expel the reason and resort to the original full in itself of doing the thing. So I'm going to have to like translate this back into normal language. What we are talking through is a simple constellation of commitments. It is something that we do inherently and something that ultimately inevitably leads. So yeah, this is like making commitments explicit is something that would be certainly within this. Being precise and sweet, like making goals explicit. Intentional habituation. This would be, once again, habitualization. These questions that I've yet to look into is how can we leverage intentional reflection to leverage order for the sake of pragmatic process? So I don't know what that means either, but I know this is the right place to put it for now, and I'll deal with it when we get there. Or sooner than that, who knows. One of the first main considerations for part 2 is determining how we can better know what we can do to affect our normative understanding of the world by looking at statistics versus anecdote, signal versus noise, and considering what constitutes rigorous evidence. So we did kind of do this in the epilogue. We obviously talk about statistics versus the anecdote. But we didn't consider signal versus the noise. But we did talk about how what constitutes rigorous evidence is almost a, we talked about it through two lenses. One's that it was a culturally developed method, and now we can actually then concretely say what that method is, which led us to things like statistics and peer review and whatnot. And reproducibility. But signal versus noise is a different topic entirely. And why would we want to talk about signal versus noise? When do we actually want to talk about that topic? In part 1... does it make sense to do that within the scientific toolkit? I think it does, actually. Anecdote, aggregation, peer review, replication, meta-analysis. Maybe it's actually in the integrating the domains of wisdom and science, actually. That's actually where yeah, that makes sense, because this kind of points out this is exactly where we need to do that. All right, so I need to write in as a to-do for that section, the integrating, add in a discussion, probably a paragraph about signal versus noise and how it pertains to what we're talking about here. All right, we'll get to that at some future date. But for now, I think I could get rid of this guy. Is determining how we can better know what we can do to affect our understanding of the world. So I think that's something that we cover completely within part 1. It's important that we discuss individual circumstances early on so that we can effectively make this case that the following tools are not always going to work on everyone the same. Similarly, each of these things that people can play with, each of these are things that people can play with and see. Okay, so this is actually a really great way to open up part 2. That the tools themselves are things to try and things to play with. It's important to stress that. Okay, so this begs the question, how do we start this? So we talk about disposition here. So I feel like this type of discussion actually should go later towards towards the later part where we're actually talking about pursuing the goals, it should come before things like learning, though. I mean, it's actually kind of like in the topic of learning. So perhaps that would go like right here, because focus and motivation are hand in hand with learning. As an adult, you really need attention in order to learn. Unlike kids who just kind of absorb things regardless of what they're effortfully paying attention to. All right, so this then becomes pretty close to the beginning here. So maybe this would be something like an introduction almost to this. We have to then talk about disposition, how disposition comes into play here. And then I can just do this. Where do I want this, though? I'm not sure. But we did get that there, so I'm happy. It might be helpful to introduce the key levers that will come up as tools within many different domains of this part. For example, sleep, social interaction, diet, exercise, etc. These are tools that benefit many different aspects of our experience/lives. If we want to organize the bulk of this section by these different aspects. So I think I thought, crazy enough, I thought that part 2 was going to be comprehensive, but not as comprehensive as we currently have it, which is going to be spanning like we now have another interesting philosophical discussion to be had in part 2. Plus, then we get to hit on like what I thought was going to be the full scope of part 2, which is all the key levers that will affect pursuing goals. But regardless, I could put this stuff like here. Because all of these things affect focus and motivation. So they're kind of like, these are like the meta qualities to look out for. Diet, exercise, yep, they're going to help with everything we do. Harari's ideas contribute to the framework by broadening what's at stake. Practical mindfulness of self-reflection is not just a personal wellness tool. Practicing mindfulness of self-reflection is not just a personal wellness tool, but potentially a defense against manipulation and a way to retain human dignity in the face of algorithmic control. Okay, so I see what's going on here. And this would be down where we're talking about biases and things that are getting in the way of perhaps our deliberate goals. And that would be like here. It almost seems like we should start off at least the goal pursuing part of part 2 by further strengthening our identity of freedom, how we can orient ourselves towards the world, our intentions, outcomes, etc. We can leverage all of the previous work that has made this explicit. Growth mindset. When did we talk about growth mindset? Well, part 1 gave us the philosophical justification. Here we can give the empirical justification. Ooh, I don't even know what this is referring to. The empirical justification of what? Yeah, I guess there's something to be said about perhaps looking into the science about volition. Like that's a serious topic. Yeah, where does that topic come up? That's a good question. Where would volition show up here? This would be something like... So by the way, identifying goals through reflection is doing... It's like, that is a goal itself. I should say that. This is a goal in itself. I don't know if that's like necessary to say or point out, but when is it important to talk about how important voluntary pursuit is? Like, that's almost like a pre discussion. Bridging part 1 and part 2. The importance of volition. I don't know if that's actually how we would want to start off part 2. Am I using volition correctly? Yes, yep. And then I should say the empirical importance of volition, just so that I'm primed in the future to know that I'm referring to looking at the empirical science on that. And so I might want to even just include it, even though I don't really know what's going on here. I'm going to just kind of include that here just so that we can think about it later on. Because I imagine as I keep thinking about thinking through all this stuff, and as I keep adding more of these notes from below, I will end up thinking more in a more sophisticated way about each part of the of this outline. So, given that more developed understanding, I'll be able to perhaps make more sense of these notes. We need to talk about early in part 2, the general practical tool of mindfulness, both towards the world, but perhaps most importantly towards ourselves. So I think we do talk about that. But it is important for us to talk about that type of thing when we're talking about identifying goals through reflection. So... yeah, I wonder if this is actually... like, I wonder if this header can go before this. In other words, I wonder if this can go within this header and this can be like right next to it. We can reiterate and perhaps expound upon what actually happens in the brain when we do this, both immediately and when practiced over longer periods of time. So perhaps not that second part yet, but it's... and this is actually a topic that comes after volition. But it's important that we ground this activity in clear science here. Of course, we need to ground this in empirical science. As insane as this sounds, we need an account of what non-scientific literature suggests about what we can do. What does, for example, the Bible, Buddhism, philosophical literature tell us about what we can do? Of course, these would help prepare hypotheses that we would like to confirm or deny within part 2. The question is, do we have a strong enough argument to take these as potentially helpful, or must we commit to a hard stance of only scientifically grounded or justified insight? So this is a question to me right now, or just in general as I'm making part 2. Like, what do we do when we're given with like wisdom advice that isn't necessarily founded in empirical science, but it's pretty intuitive? Like, we generally believe it's real. It makes sense. This would be something like a part 2 squared, or we just make part 2 huge. Okay, so hearing that, then that suggests that maybe it would be within like some sort of epilogue of part 2. And the meta strategies things might go sooner than I had expected. Yeah, I probably should probably just put that. So this is a different epilogue now. This would have gone right here now. All right. Oh, okay. And I said this twice, as crazy as it sounds. Importantly, as crazy as it sounds, it is important that we also periodically study this framework so that we ensure we see the world through this lens. That's kind of a takeaway that we can now make in part 2 as we are now practically oriented towards what we're doing. And that is something that is like a meta strategy. That's literally what we talk about here. It's just weird to do it this early in the document, I guess. But it does encapsulate part 1. Like it is generally important to really reiterate, but to like apply this knowledge. So like to prime your brain to think in this way, provided you actually think it's beneficial. That's actually kind of the stipulation here. Where did I say that? The stipulation being as long as you think that this information will help you achieve your goals. We could build a habit of mindfulness towards our emotions, our felt certainty, and the signals of conscience, right? We can make that type of claim sooner rather than later because we've already set up those concepts in part 1. And we can talk about that here. Maybe. Not the habit part. But maybe so. Maybe we just suggest that. And then later on, we explain how you can build habits. That's. I don't know if that's the right order to do that in, or do you want to learn how to build habits and then you learn what you should build the habits for? Who knows? Of course, we often resist recognizing our errors. Cognitive biases can make us ignore evidence. Part of our framework's practical push is to overcome these biases, using our capacity for reflection to counteract our instinct to explain away errors, mentioning that we will need to consider these within part 2. I could probably get rid of that. We already know that. Regardless, this shows awareness that the error reflection process must sometimes be actively cultivated rather than assumed to happen automatically. Interesting. All right, so definitely let's put that in the biases section, which would be dealing with inherent constraints. Let's make this an actual header of some sort. The framework encourages an almost scientific mindset in personal life. Hypothesize, test, accept the results. This doesn't mean cold rationality devoid of meaning. Rather, it means respecting reality enough to let it correct you. Wonderful. That's something that we could probably that's a case we could probably make back here near the end. Once again, the process of realignment. On rational thinking. Okay, so we have a section for this too. Logical reasoning. Rational thinking is actually kind of... I mean, it's more ambiguous, actually. But it sounds nice. On rational thinking, over time, this practice builds a robust trustworthiness in one's own thinking. You know you're not lying to yourself, and that gives confidence in making decisions. It's analogous to always having a reliable compass. If your internal compass is calibrated to truth, you navigate life's forest more effectively. I don't know who wrote that, but knowing you've really thought it through. So this is something we talk about at the end of part 1, and it's something that we could reiterate here. Once again, I could say reiterate this takeaway of part 1. Yeah. And I'll just throw it in there. Massive theme in part 2 must be value and goal, both for the sake of A, making decisions and reaching our goals, and giving us a foundation to stand on in part 3. Thus, we need to discuss decently early on the difference between consequentialism and deontology and non-moral lens, rather in a discussion of what's possible. Oh, I think that discussion we can only do once we learn once we have this idea of general tips that lead us towards our goal, and when we learn about what can actually contribute towards that goal, the question is like, what ought you do? So where would this go? This would go pretty late. Would it go in meta strategies here? Goal ethics? Thinking the ethics of goals. The implicit ethics of goals. That's the type of language we need to have there. I think these are two different discussions. I don't think it needs to be decently early. This could be a discussion while we're talking about the implicit ethics of goals. Massive theme in part 2 must be value and goal. So once again, this is like deliberate intention, and this would be I mean, it's really, we're talking about just two different perspectives on goals. Some goals you just have as like baseline, foundational, inherent goals, which would be like values, like generally you follow this, and deliberate intentions are more clear, like this is a clear way to go now, I think. So it's considering, man, maybe I'll just put this with this actually in the opposite order, as I think this first part will make more sense of the second part. Perhaps we need to we can take from this interdisciplinary connections. What is this talking about? As evidence from this review, optimizing human performance and well-being is inherently interdisciplinary. Cognitive science and neuroscience explain the learning mechanisms and attention limits that education and productivity techniques must heed. Behavioral psychology translates neural insights into habit training methods and bias awareness into decision-making frameworks. All right, so this is talking about a bunch of things, all relating to pursuing goals. Evolutionary psychology provides context on why our default behaviors are the way they are, informing strategies to work with or around those instincts. Social psychology and sociology highlight that individual optimization doesn't happen in a vacuum. Our social environment can amplify or sabotage our efforts, so leveraging group that was the thing that actually, yeah, I totally forgot about that. Biases needs to be, like the discussion of biases is pretty large. So it's like the effects of the like navigating, the effects of social, what's the word? I think we literally use it in part 1. Dynamics. So I think we're going to have to just grab paragraphs from this and just throw them where they're supposed to go, or sentences. Optimizing human performance and well-being is inherently interdisciplinary. Cognitive science and neuroscience explain the learning mechanisms and attention limits that education and productivity techniques must heed. So this goes into learning. Behavioral psychology translates neural insights into habit training methods and bias awareness into, so this is 2 different things, but we can put can I just make the same sentence? Translate bias awareness into, throw that in under here. Evolutionary psychology provides context on why our default behaviors are as they are, informing strategies to work with or around those instincts. So we will talk about just our dispositions in a way that doesn't that isn't redundant with how we've already talked about this stuff in part 1. However, we can talk about the constraints of disposition here. So let's actually just get that going. Disposition. And then we can throw this guy here. Pursuing a fix for obstacles. This is like a general idea. This is something that we could do in a introduction. Meanwhile, biology reminds us that mind and body are one. Sleep, nutrition, and physiology underpin mental capabilities. This is what we put all the way up where we talked about sleep. Where do we talk about sleep here? Was it not up here? General practical tool in mindfulness. Oh no, we ended up putting that in the beginning of pursuing goals right here. So I think just right there. Finally, technology acts as both a tool and a disruptor across all these domains, effectively becoming a new environment that our ancient brains must navigate. Fine, but that's not that important. I did want to put in the learning section that it would be important to talk about the tools that we have to learn. It would be necessary, I should just say worthwhile, to discuss the tools that we have at our disposal. For example, language models. That's definitely worth discussing when we're talking about how to learn better. To truly optimize human performance and decision making, one must take a holistic approach, improving brain function through lifestyle, positively cognitive training, honing mental strategies, learning. So this is kind of our conclusion. Structuring supportive social and smartly integrating technology. Oh, that's another thing. We could set up other positive things that would help us, like social support. Like it doesn't have to be just dealing with inherent constraints, but dealing with or like more meta things like pursuing goals that help us pursue our other goals. That's kind of what this is kind of pursuing goals that, yeah, this is similarly pursuing goals that help us. Can I just put that as a pursuing goals that help us pursue our other goals? And then there, we could talk about it in a positive light, and then there's like a negative light, but it's all about, or it's all under this same more broad discussion. So disposition, it's kind of like it is an aspect of our disposition. It is human that that having a good social like having relationships can help you out in all of your goals, just because it makes you feel better and stuff. So this would be, I don't know, the effects of social relationships. And then I wanted to bring this guy down to our, maybe down here, how to push ourselves. And it's not about optimizing, but it's almost about this. Once again, leads us back to the ethics of goals. That if you want to achieve a goal, there are things you have to do in order to achieve that goal, like conceptually. But then you can start thinking like more meta ethics here, where it's like if you actually want to. If you want to pursue more goals, then it helps to be more efficient in each goal that you pursue. So that's actually kind of a thing to talk about, or thing to write down, a worthwhile thing to write down. We would need to justify why we want to optimize or quicken or make more efficient our goal pursuits. We would need to introduce some meta goal about increasing the amount of goals we achieve, etc. Introduce some meta goal, perhaps about I'm gonna have to think about that. The question is like, if we're only concerned about identifying and achieving goals here, why do we care if we're efficient in that process at all? There's got to be some meta goal here that not only do we want to be able to achieve our goals, like we want to achieve our goals efficiently and quickly and something like that. This is something we need to talk about up front. So why would we want to do that? What are we actually looking for here? This is part of identifying goals. We need to consider the meta goals we may implicitly have, begging the question why we even care about being better at achieving our goals. If we're focused on a goal, why does it matter if we're only focused on the goal we have in mind? Why does it matter that we achieve it quickly versus taking our entire life to achieve it? And so we have to consider what we implicitly, like what goals we actually implicitly hold, and how that affects this, our very, the very reason why we would even want to read something like this. Why would we even want to learn how to achieve goals quicker or more efficiently? Why does that matter? I should probably write that down. In other words, why do we even want to achieve goals more efficiently, quickly, effectively, etc.? That's a discussion to be had. All right, perhaps we could take from this interdisciplinary connections. Each topic we've covered feeds into this larger framework. So did I ever actually write that down in the end here? I think I did. Yes. Each topic we've covered feeds into this larger framework. For instance, establishing a habit might rely on an if-then implementation plan and an accountability group. So yeah, this is kind of a practical way where we can point out how to actually put all this stuff together in a very practical way. I'll just say that, putting it all together for now. Perhaps we could take from this by drawing on key scientific insights across these fields, from how synapses form to how social norms operate, and applying them in practical, integrated ways. Anyone can improve their ability to learn effectively. Okay, so this is kind of implicit here. The science of human optimization shows that while we all have limitations and biases, that we also have a remarkable capacity for growth and adaptation when we use evidence-based methods. Armed with this knowledge, one can design a personal development plan. All right, we can get rid of that. I don't know if this is worth saying either, or at least keeping for now. Yeah, I think I'm going to get rid of it for now. All right, consider our pursuit towards goals. It's important to realize that we experience shallow stories of ourself/goals. So shallow as in, I guess, reductions. Stories of ourselves/goals unless we habitualize deeper critical thinking. The main takeaway is that these stories teach us how to self-consciously think about our role in life, which affects our identity and therefore our future thoughts. Without such stories, we aren't intrinsically, naturally, inherently prompted to critically think about ourselves. Our experience is shallow in this regard. It seems that when we subconsciously generate these types of goals that present an image of the ideal future, we don't exactly view a spatial image of the future state, but rather feel the expectation of reward that we will gain from it. Okay. That's actually something to consider. The experience of desire as we consider a goal. Like, what is that all about? We need to consider the experience of desire when we ideate goals. And obviously we would want to reflect upon that. Generally, the higher the dopamine that we subconsciously expect to gain from it, so this might be a hypothesis. Generally, the higher the dopamine that we subconsciously expect to gain from it, the more prone we are to set it as a goal. So when we are making a decision between two rewarding outcomes, we make such a comparison. Yeah, so I don't know that to be true, so I can't say that. So we need to look into habitualizing learning, dopamine, etc., to see why things that become habits provide us with dopamine. Okay. This has to be in, where is this? Making goals explicit, or is this identifying? I'm guessing this is identifying, but it's also got little bits of making goals explicit, but not quite. I think this is still identifying. Disposition. Yeah, I'm just going to stick it here, figure out why or what it is we need from that. Eventually, we need to make a more precise notion of information diet. Yes, this is another thing. This is like, oh, what do we do about this? This is like a meta goal as well. This is a meta strategy. Like what goal can you do that contributes to your other goals? That's why we would. You see, this is crazy because this would also be. This also deserves to have this meta strategy section. So I'm not sure what to make of that. All of these things are all of these making goals explicit type things are also goals that would help us pursue our other goals. So I'm not sure. Not sure what to make of that. All the first parts of part 2 will concern all the different considerations of how we experience how experience affects our understanding. The later parts can concern how we can intentionally modify our own self-identity. Over time, we can convince ourselves that we are some way. We fake it until we make it. We need to earn intentional changes in our self-identity. So this is a discussion about the realignment. Reliability and risk-taking. When should we assume and act upon our assumption or assumed preferences of others, or even if we aren't certain of truth? This is where we gain trust, which we had, right? Trustworthiness in one's own thinking. So this is where we would talk about reliability, perhaps. How about reliability and taking risk? Okay, 1 hour and a half. I think we might just call it there. Not actually fully, because I do want to create our summary of yesterday, which was 09/02/25 stream summary. And I need to actually make the stream summary first. So let us find that. (902) 10. All right. Let's do it. Don't do the canvas. That's so far so good. Ah, bummer. It did it. All right, so I guess just to close out what we've been doing here. Today was the first day that we actually went onto this part 2 page. We're sifting through all the notes that we have in here, slowly but surely. There's a lot of just random notes, different things that I've thought of or that have come up in conversation, etc., that I think we should include in the part 2 discussions. We have to figure out what narrative flow makes sense, where all these things can fit and make sense within coherent categories. So that's kind of what we're doing by slowly putting things in here. We're kind of seeing how in what order we should be discussing these ideas. Hopefully it's our development of this is not going to be as crazy as part 1's. In part 1, we were moving things around left and right until I figured out a good direction, which I think was around at the beginning of this calendar year. And then I think the rest of this calendar year was just me finishing up what was remaining from that direction. But hopefully we can just kind of outline this and then work through the outline once that's done. But yeah, every Wednesday we're going to be working on part 2 stuff. It's not as pressing as working on the part 1 stuff we need to do, like getting part 1 ready for an audience. Especially since I'm going to be making content on part 1. I'm going to be making videos, reading through it. So we're going to essentially have 2 days for part 1 content every week and 1 day for part 2 content. And then our Monday and Friday are essentially fun days in a sense. Monday, I think it's going to be Maps and Meaning Mondays. So we're just going to be watching Maps and Meaning and maybe having discussion. And then Friday, we're going to be talking, or we're going to be watching other content creators in the space, trying to get a feel for the space, trying to find content creators that we might want to collaborate with, either eventually if they're really large or more, in the nearer future. So we're gonna have to start fishing for low viewered content creators, and yeah. All right, we got to try again without Canvas so that it actually creates the code block. Since we're trying to get Markdown formatted text to just paste into our Reddit post. Oh my gosh, I just went the entire stream with this thing up on my screen. This is incredible. I can't believe I did this. Wow. An hour and a half with the calendar or the schedule up on the screen. I got to just stop turning it on in the beginning of the stream. I think that's just, it's killing me. I've done that over and over again. It just means that could anyone even read the screen? Barely. Which I guess there's not really anything pressing on the screen. I'm really just reading through everything, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay. Yesterday's stream, debugging reality, thumbnails, trauma, and the philosophy of freedom. We started as a classic, why isn't my thumbnail working stream? What started as a classic, that stream, quickly spiraled into one of our deepest philosophical discussions yet. It keeps saying this, even though it doesn't know what previous discussions we've had. We began by troubleshooting the technical gremlins in our new YouTube multi-stream setup, but soon found ourselves wrestling with the very nature of existence, the limits of language, and the core arguments of the Stan Richardson document. In between, we received and processed some incredibly sharp, constructive feedback on part 1, helping us refine its arguments and improve its accessibility for the video series to come. So we did a technical deep dive on Restream. Philosophical Gauntlet, an impromptu Q&A with chat quickly evolved into a rigorous discussion on topics ranging from whether existence came from nothing, to Wittgenstein's philosophy of language, to the role of trauma in shaping our predictive models of reality. Document workshop. We reviewed a detailed AI-generated critique of part 1 of the document. This led to concrete action items such as adding more relatable examples, clarifying the narrative and strengthening the transitions between abstract philosophical concepts and practical activity. Video pre-production. We used the feedback session to begin outlining the key points for the next major video, a formal introduction to the entire 3-part document and its ambitious aims. The stream constantly returned to the idea that our experience of the world is not a passive reception of facts, but an active construction. The practical takeaway from this is the power of reframing. When you feel stuck or overwhelmed by a situation, consciously treat it not as a fixed reality, but as one interpretation among many. Ask yourself, what's another lens I can view this through? How would a different person interpret this? What if I treated this problem not as a threat, but as a puzzle? This mental shift from accepting a situation to actively interpreting it is a foundational step towards the freedom of process we're exploring, the ability to consciously participate in the construction of your own experience. Chatter of the day, Dharmadom. Tonight's award goes to Dharmadom for bringing a thoughtful and well-articulated perspective from Eastern philosophy into our discussion. Their comments on awareness, consciousness as a ground, and the experiences of yogis provided a fantastic challenge and counterpoint to the stream's materialist scientific framework. This sparked a deep, nuanced, and respectful dialogue about different ways of knowing and interpreting reality, which is exactly what this community is all about. Highlights of the day, the existence from nothing gauntlet. What started out as a single potent question from chat, did existence originally come from nothing? Which I think was Nitro Gold's test question on whether or not I was a worthy philosophy streamer. Sent us down a fascinating philosophical rabbit hole. We were forced to dissect the semantics of existence, nothing, and experience from multiple angles. The cosmological, so what happened with the Big Bang, the phenomenological, our conscious experience, and the conceptual, how language shapes these ideas. Wittgenstein versus embodied experience was a highlight. The classic quote, the limits of my language means the limits of my language mean the limits of my world, was put to the test. This led to a fantastic back and forth about whether our embodied nonverbal sense of the world is actually broader than what we can articulate. It was a perfect example of how a simple quote can unpack a huge, complex debate about the nature of reality and communication. Miracles and magic. The hypothetical, what would you do if you saw Jesus performing miracles, prompted a great discussion on belief, pragmatism, and the line between a psychological event, a magic trick, and a genuine supernatural occurrence. Onion Helmet's immediate pledge of discipleship was a hilarious and honest highlight. Quotes of the day. Onion Helmet says, reacting to the penguins in the welcome video, I was like, what the F? This has got to be an error, dog. Nitro Gold said, morality may be the obligation of using our will to keep the universe from going to nothing. I said, quoting the document's central thesis, yo, Onion Helmet, what's good? I scrolled far. You didn't win, but I'll just say you won the you did get this shout out though. But yeah. Finishing up the stream, unfortunately, but we're doing the fun review of yesterday's stream. I said, quoting the document's central thesis, freedom is not the ability to defy causality, but the self-conscious capacity to reflect upon, understand, and deliberately influence the very predictive models that generate our experience. Dharmadom said, you were never born, you will never die. Onion Helmet says, listen, man, if I saw Jesus Christ performing miracles, I'm a disciple. And then he said, religion is actually very practical for ethics. Very nice. Key concepts, predictive processing, phenomenology, the mind-body problem. And that was the fundamental philosophical question of how mental states relate to physical states. Our discussion explored whether we need to fully solve this mystery to still gain practical insights from the correlations we can observe. which is pretty nice. I mean, it's true. I would be a disciple. And I don't blame you. I mean, especially if he, was exactly like how he is in the Bible. Like, he seems like a pretty compelling dude, like a pretty interesting guy. At least for the time. I don't know what that would look like today, but... All right. I'm going to send it. My last action as a philosophy streamer before I become an absolute gaming streamer tomorrow. You missed it, Onion Helmet. I had the schedule up for the entirety of the first hour and 30 minutes of this stream, and I was, what is the phrase? Hitting myself in the leg? I don't know. But I was very upset about that. Yep, Silk Song it is. Let's just look at a Silk Song poster or something like that. I actually haven't looked into too much about this game. I haven't looked into the videos that dissect the trailer or anything. But it should be pretty cool. Pretty nice. Pretty nice stuff. Looks like some fighting gonna happen. Some boss battles. I don't know what to... I'm curious what the people are going to be like in this world. Am I going to be going live at 10 a.m.? Isn't that right on release? I will be going live at 10 a.m. right on release. Absolutely. I did take off from work. Granted, I took off for another reason, but it did line up with Silk Song, so I will be hopefully hopping on at like, I don't know, 9:45, getting ready, and then just going for it, and then hopefully talking through everything I do. I don't know what I should have like a I don't know. I'm gonna be taking notes probably. Like, this is a game where you have to like, they don't give you like a clear map, so I might be writing down things. So I don't know. Do I just hold it up to the camera like that? Is that what I do? I don't know. It would be nice if I had a whiteboard or something behind me, but this is gonna be good. I mean, we'll see. We'll see if as long as I don't get lost, because a lot of people in Hollow Knight find frustration pretty early on in the game because it's so difficult to know where you're supposed to be going, because the game doesn't really tell you. It's difficult to know which paths you can't take, because it's a Metroidvania, so a lot of paths are gated by some ability that you will get at some point in the game. So I think I'm going to try to be as conservative as possible. So in Hollow Knight, they allow you to buy markers for your map so that you can signify different things that you run into. But it costs money to do that. So the question is, do you spend your money on that? And I will probably try to spend my money on anything that makes it easier for me to navigate, just so that we don't get that type of frustration near the beginning of the game. I'm pretty confident about the other stuff that we're going to be facing. But it's a real pain in the butt to be running around and not being able to find anything while also dying on the way. So I'm going to be careful. Am I going to be doing more gaming streams like with other games? Eventually, but not necessarily soon after Silk Song is done. Like, I really should be spending as much time as possible on the stuff that we're trying to do, because I think it's so important. This is a selfish detour, but I don't think we could justify a selfish detour, as frequently as I mean, unless it's really popular. Like, unless we could justify it because a lot of people enjoy watching it, and therefore we get to build the channel through that, and as a response, or as as an outcome of that, more people are now coming to the streams where we're talking about, like philosophy and improving our lives and stuff like that. Then it now makes more sense. But I'm certainly not going to be posting content to the YouTube channel. Like I don't want to make this for now. I don't want to make this a gaming / some other, what we actually do here channel. So I don't know. Maybe we just have special occasions. Like maybe we just have like weekends where we get into a game for like a goof. I don't know, like a League of Legends weekend. That would be kind of fun. If large games come out that I really am excited for, then perhaps I would stream for those as well. But those are quite rare. Like I think the last one before this game was the Elden Ring DLC, Shadows of the Erdtree. So that was like last year. That was over a year ago. So we get one of these like once a year. So we'll see. That said, Hades 2 might be worthwhile. I haven't played the early access, but when it comes out, I don't know if that's a fun one to do on stream though. Like I think Hollow Knight might be more fun because it's an exploration, where Hades is very much you're seeing the same thing over again and getting a little more of the story every single time you die, really. So we'll have to see. I'm not sure. But yeah, I guess if there's also like single player games that people would really want to watch me play, that would be worthwhile. However, I have played a decent amount of games, so chances are I might have already played those games. Or I've deemed that I don't want to play those games. All right, that's my whole gaming story. Thanks for hopping in, Onion Helmet. And if anyone else is watching, thank you for checking in as well. I will see you all tomorrow for some Silksong. Have a good rest of the night.